3 complaints, 8 months of perfect scores, the highest customer satisfaction ratings on my team, and they fired me over 3 complaints about my accent. I remember sitting in that HR office, my hands shaking, asking to see the documentation. The manager slid the papers across the desk. 3 out of thousands of calls. I looked up at her and said, "Is this a joke?" She didn't answer. She just started explaining the severance package. "My name is Tendai Moyo. I'm 34 years old and I've been in America for 8 years now. I came from Harare, Zimbabwe, and I currently live in Phoenix, Arizona. Today, I want to tell you the story of how my accent got me fired, what it taught me about racism in America, and why knowing who you are is the only armor that actually works. Please stay with me until the end, because this story isn't about being a victim. It's about transformation. Let me take you back to Harare, because you can't understand what I lost without knowing what I had. I was a teacher, not just any teacher. I taught English literature at a secondary school in the suburbs. You want to know the irony? I taught Shakespeare, Dickens, the Brontë sisters. Every day I stood in front of 40 students and broke down the beauty of the English language. My students passed their O-levels with some of the best scores in the district. I had a gift, everyone said so. I could make Macbeth come alive, make teenagers actually care about whether Heathcliff deserved redemption. I had a small flat near my parents, a decent salary, and I was engaged to my university sweetheart, Tapiwa. Life was good, but Zimbabwe in 2015 was not easy. The economy was collapsing around us. I remember the day I went to the bank to withdraw my month's salary and they told me there was no cash. Not that I didn't have money, no, the money was there on paper. There was simply no physical cash in the entire bank. Teachers were being paid in bonds that lost value by the hour. My mother needed medication for her diabetes and we couldn't afford it because the pharmacies wanted American dollars. One evening, I came home and found my father sitting in the dark. The electricity had been cut again, but it wasn't just that. He looked at me and said, "Tendai, this country has nothing left to give you. You have to go." I applied for the diversity visa lottery that same week. When I won, I cried for 2 hours straight. Half joy, half grief. The day I left, my mother packed sadzamis into my suitcase. She knew I wouldn't find it easily in America. My father gave me $200, everything he had saved for 6 months. Quote 2, he said, and his voice cracked. Tapiwa drove me to the airport, and we sat in the parking lot for an hour because neither of us could say goodbye. We weren't married yet, and we didn't know when we would see each other again. I flew from Harare to Johannesburg, then Johannesburg to Atlanta, then Atlanta to Phoenix, 32 hours of travel. When I landed in Phoenix in March of 2016, the heat hit me and I almost laughed. Everyone had warned me about American winters, but nobody told me that Arizona feels like home. I had $800, 1 suitcase, and my cousin's address written on a piece of paper. My first impression of America, everything was so big. The airport, the highways, the cars, the drinks at the gas station. I bought a soda and it was the size of my head. I thought, maybe this is what abundance feels like. My cousin Rutendo had been in Phoenix for 4 years. She worked at a hospital as a nursing assistant and shared an apartment with 2 other Zimbabwean women. I slept on her couch for 3 months. The first thing I learned about America is that your qualifications mean nothing until someone decides they mean something. I had a degree in English literature, 5 years of teaching experience, and excellent references. I applied to 37 teaching positions. I got 2 interviews. The first one, the principal looked at my resume and said, "So you've never taught in an American classroom?" I explained that I had taught the same curriculum, the same books, the same exams. She nodded politely and said they would be in touch. They never called. The second interview went better until the assistant principal asked me to say something so we can hear how you sound. I recited the opening of A Tale of Two Cities from memory. She smiled and said, "That's lovely, But parents might have trouble understanding you at conferences. I didn't get that job either, so I took what I could get. My cousin connected me with a staffing agency and they placed me at a call center for a regional bank. The pay was $14 an hour, which seemed incredible until I realized what rent cost in Phoenix. I worked the afternoon shift, answering calls from customers about their accounts, resolving disputes, explaining fees. And you know what? I was good at it, really good. Within 2 months, my customer satisfaction scores were the highest on the floor. I had a gift for calming angry people down, for explaining complicated things simply. My supervisor, a white woman named Karen, actually used my calls as training examples for new hires. She would say, I started to feel like maybe I had found my footing. I was sending money home every month, enough for my mother's medication, enough to help my younger brother with his university fees. Tapiwa and I talked every night on WhatsApp, planning for him to join me once I got my green card. Life was moving forward. Then came the meeting with HR. 8 months in, no warnings, no negative feedback, just a calendar invite that said performance discussion. I walked in thinking maybe I was getting a raise. The HR manager, a woman I'd never met before, sat across from me with a folder. I felt my stomach drop. I asked. She opened the folder. Quote 10. 3. I had taken over 6,000 calls in that period. 3 people out of 6,000 had complained. I asked to see the complaints. She hesitated but showed me. One said, quote 11. Another said, quote 12. The third just said, quote 13. No details about whether their issues were resolved. No mention of my perfect resolution rate. Just quote 14. I looked at Karen, my supervisor, who was sitting in the corner looking at the floor. Quote 15. She didn't look up. I'm sorry, Tendai. It's out of my hands. Here's what nobody tells you about being a black immigrant in America. You face racism from 2 directions, and neither one sees you clearly. White Americans look at you and see a black person first. All the stereotypes, all the assumptions, all the fear. But then you open your mouth and they hear the accent, and suddenly you become something else, something foreign, something to be suspicious of in a different way. Quote 17. They ask as if your answer will help them categorize you correctly. As if knowing you're from Zimbabwe instead of Chicago changes which box you belong in. And then there are black Americans. And this is complicated to talk about, but it's true. Some of them embraced me immediately. My neighbor, Keisha, a black American woman who grew up in South Phoenix, became one of my closest friends. She taught me how to navigate the DMV, warned me which neighborhoods to avoid, invited me to her church, but others looked at me with suspicion. Quote 18. Someone said to me once at a cookout, quote 19, as if the two were mutually exclusive, as if my skin color changed because I was born on a different continent. I learned to code switch in ways I never had to in Zimbabwe. With white Americans, I made my accent softer, more neutral. With black Americans, I tried to prove I belonged, that I understood their history, that I wasn't looking down on them. It was exhausting. Some days I felt like I was performing a version of myself for everyone I met. After I lost the call center job, I spiraled for a while. I took a job at a retail store, folding clothes and dealing with customers who treated me like furniture. One afternoon, a woman asked to speak to someone who speaks English. I had just spent 5 minutes helping her in English. She meant someone who sounded American. I went home that night and cried on the phone with Tapiwa. Maybe I should come back, I said. This country doesn't want me. But going back felt like failure. All that sacrifice, my father's $200, my mother's prayers, the years of waiting for Tapiwa's visa. I couldn't let it mean nothing, so I started thinking differently. If employers saw my accent as a liability, maybe I needed to work for myself. I had been tutoring Zimbabwean kids online, helping them prepare for exams just to make extra money. But I realized there was a bigger market. Immigrant parents everywhere wanted their children to succeed academically. They valued education the way my parents did, as the key to everything. I started building an online tutoring business. English, literature, writing skills. I marketed myself specifically to immigrant families. And you know what I discovered? My accent, the thing that got me fired, became an asset. Parents trusted me because I sounded like them, because I understood what it meant to come from somewhere else and want desperately for your children to succeed here. 2 years ago, Tapiwa finally got his visa. We got married at a small ceremony in Phoenix, surrounded by Zimbabwean friends and a few American ones too. Keisha was there, wearing an African print dress she bought just for the occasion. My parents watched on video call, my mother crying the whole time. I wish I could say America is everything I dreamed it would be, but the truth is more complicated. I have built a business that lets me work from home and be my own boss. I earn more than I ever would have in Zimbabwe. My mother gets her medication every month. My brother graduated from university. And my father doesn't sit in the dark anymore because I pay for a generator. But I have also learned that success doesn't protect you from racism. Degrees don't protect you. Perfect scores don't protect you. An Uber passenger once asked me if I could read the GPS. I have 2 degrees and was running a 6-figure business at the time. He didn't apologize when I told him. He just went silent, which is somehow worse than an apology. Because silence means he didn't learn anything. He just felt awkward. So, what have I learned in 8 years? That racism in America operates on assumptions. When people hear my accent, they assume things about my intelligence, my education, my capabilities. They assume I'm less than before I've said anything of substance. And here's the hard truth. Your credentials won't always save you from those assumptions. I could have had a PhD from Oxford, and that call center would still have fired me. Because the problem was never really about whether customers could understand me. The problem was that 3 people had a foreign accent and decided that was a complaint worth making. And a company decided those 3 complaints mattered more than 6,000 successful calls. But knowing who you are, that's different. That's armor they can't take from you. When I lost that job, I could have internalized their judgment. I could have believed that my accent was a flaw, something to be fixed or hidden. Instead, I decided that my accent was evidence of my journey. It represents the country that raised me, the education I received, the languages I speak. It represents my mother's voice telling me stories, my father's voice teaching me proverbs, my students in Harare calling me, quote, Children 23. My accent is not a limitation. It is a history. You know what's funny? My business has grown to the point where I've hired 2 other tutors. Both of them are immigrants. One is from Nigeria, one is from Jamaica. We joke that our accents are our competitive advantage because we serve families who see themselves in us, who trust us because we've walked the same path. Last month, a mother in Texas told me her son raised his grade from a C to an A in English. You helped him believe he could do it, she said. And I thought about that principal who didn't want to hire me because of how I sound. I wonder what she would think now. I hope she never thinks of me at all. I've stopped needing her approval. I've stopped needing approval from people who see my accent as a barrier instead of a bridge. Some days I still miss home so much it feels like a physical ache. I miss my mother's cooking, the sound of Shona being spoken everywhere, the way the jacaranda trees bloom in Harare. I miss being normal, being unremarkable, being just another Zimbabwean woman instead of a representative of every African immigrant who ever existed. But I also love what I've built here. I love my husband, my business, my community of friends who understand what it means to belong to 2 places at once. If you're watching this and you're an immigrant or the child of immigrants or someone who has ever been made to feel like your voice doesn't belong, I want you to know something. They can question your accent. They can question your credentials. They can make you feel like you have to prove yourself twice as much for half the recognition, but they cannot take your story. They cannot take the journey that made you who you are. They cannot take your knowledge of your own worth. Hold on to that. It's the only thing that actually protects you. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, please subscribe to Black Immigrant Stories and leave a comment telling me where you're from. I want to hear your accent in my mind as I read it. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters exactly as it is. Remember, 3 complaints didn't end me. They redirected me. And wherever you are in your journey, the same can be true for you. My name is Tendai Moyo. I'm from Harare, and my accent is not a flaw. It's proof that I survived.